I don't know. It is like having a new toy. I mean, look at it. I mean, it is pretty wild how this thing is all rigged up. It looks like a tree. I call it the Goro. If you're a Mortal Kombat fan, you know what I'm saying when I call it the Goro. So I'm rolling on this and I'm focusing on the camera, and then I'm gonna rack focus to me in the mirror and back to the camera. And yeah, I love it. And here I'll show you a little bit of the flashlight mode. 1, 2 here. I'm sure you guys have seen lots of reviews on the different modes that this thing does, but I just love this where you could just boop, 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 boop. You know, it's not too often where you can get a look like this on the GlideCam. You know, and what's really nice for this is realty shoots, you know, where you have to like hold it sideways and you need to like get that, you know, they love when you get the shots of the stove and all the appliances, and you know, you're just in there like this and you're just, you know, it's really cool. I did run into some issues with it. The first one being that a lot of people said, hey man, if you want to fly this, you're gonna have to take your cage off, yada, yada, yada. And I thought, I don't know if I agree with that. I'm watching videos online where people are flying FS5s on the Tilta Gravity, they're flying Red Scarlets on the Tilta Gravity, and I thought, why would I need to take the cage off of the pocket? You know, it's not adding that much more weight. The Tilta Gravity holds up to 8 pounds. What's the deal here? All you have to do is rebalance the Tilta so the motor is sitting in the front. I have this turned off, but right now I have it balanced to where the motor is actually sitting in front of the camera. Usually this motor right here, this motor is usually sitting behind the camera, right? And that's how a lot of guys are flying bigger cameras, bigger rigs on this Tilta Gravity. They're repositioning the motor to the front. When you do that, however, you think, oh yeah, I'm gonna balance it so the motor sits in the front. And then when you turn that thing on, the whole thing will go and it'll flip back around and your lens will hit the motor, and it goes a little wild because the Tilta doesn't know that you're rebalancing it that way. So there is a little bit of a trick to it. You're basically having to set it up backwards, right? Because right out the gate, your Tilta's not gonna know that you're setting the motor under the lens, because that's backwards for the Tilta. You're gonna put the whole thing on the table facing you, right? And you're gonna set it up so the lens is facing you rather than facing forward. And then when you get it balanced that way, then when you go into the Tilta app, and you'll notice that in here, they don't have the G2 as an option here. They just have the Nucleus 3, the Gravity, and the G1. I thought that was very weird, but I don't know if they're ever gonna update this. I mean, the G2's been out for a while, but they just tell you, Tilta tells you just to use the G1. So yeah, you go in here, you use G1, and then you go into calibration, and there you can turn the motors off, and you're gonna recalibrate it and then turn the motor back on, so then it'll know, okay, the motor needs to sit in the front. I've been recalibrated as such. And basically you're just telling the Tilta, hey, this is how we're calibrating you now. Your motor's now gonna sit in the front, and that's pretty cool. The only weird thing about Tilta, and I've noticed this with the little Nucleus Nano as well, that you kind of have to calibrate all these things twice. And even Tilta themselves will tell you to do that, do everything twice. I don't know, I find that kind of weird, but I guess, hey, if that's how they do things, that's how they do things. Tap calibration, you go in here and you'll notice you have 3 different options in here. You have the gyro cal, the 0-point cal, and the accelerometer cal, right? You have to do each one of these. And you have to do each one of these twice, and you have to do each one of these solely on their own, right? So the first thing you're gonna turn the motors off, and then you're gonna go in here and you're gonna calibrate the gyro, right? You're gonna let it do its thing until it says it's complete, and then you're gonna hit it again, hit calibrate again, let it do it again, and then you're gonna turn the motors back on. And if it looks like it's sitting correctly, you can move on to the 0-point calibration. However, if it's not looking like it's sitting correctly, you are gonna have to physically turn the whole Tilta Gravity off, just turn the entire thing off. You're just gonna wanna recheck all the balancing of it, make sure that nothing got weird when you were rigging it up. Also, before you start balancing this thing, you wanna make sure that all your little cables and things are plugged in. Meaning, if you know you're gonna run a monitor, plug in every single wire before you start balancing, because every little tiny bit of weight is gonna push and pull, and each one of those cables is gonna push and pull its own little way. So you wanna make sure all that stuff is plugged in and everything's tied in how you like it, and make sure you're using a lot of baby cables. You know, like I specifically bought 1 foot cables, you know, that's the smallest I could find a lot of these cables. So yeah, you wanna make sure you don't have some big long HDMI cable, because then you're gonna have to deal with that. You have 5 points that you need to check on the gimbal, right? You have the roll down here, you have the motor, you have the head, and then you also have the base plate front and back and side to side. That's 5 points that you need to check and triple check each one and make sure it's all sitting perfectly where you want it before you even turn the gimbal on. And then hopefully when you go into the app and it syncs, and hopefully it sits correctly. If not, you can try to do it again. Go into calibration, turn the motor off here, reset it where you want it to go, because sometimes when you first turn it on, it kind of does its own thing. You can, once you get into the app and go into calibration, you can turn the motors off and you can reset it yourself and then do the gyro cal twice and then turn the motors back on, and usually it'll be sitting where it needs to be sitting. One of the more trickiest parts of the Tilta Gravity that I noticed, specifically with the Pocket 4K, sometimes it does have trouble with the 0 point. 0 point is where your gimbal nose is static resting place, right? Like that basically is what 0 point means. It knows like this is the resting place where everything is perfect and even, right? But a lot of times that can be off. And a good way to check it is when your gimbal is just sitting on its own, if it's sitting crooked or it's shooting this way or that way, that's not a good perfect 0 point setting. You need to go in here, you need to turn the motors off. Before you do anything, you do need to make sure the motors are off, right? You can leave the gimbal on at first, leave the gimbal on, but in the app, turn the motors off and reset it to what looks like the perfect resting spot. That's your 0 point, right? And then go in here, hit the 0 point. The pan button is basically so it'll calibrate. So you hit that, let it do its thing till it says it's complete, hit it again. Like I said, Tilta recommends you do all this stuff twice, and it's gonna redo it again. And then turn your motors back on. And if it still is doing a weird thing, then you're gonna have to physically turn the gimbal all the way off on the actual gimbal, turn it off, reset everything where you think is the perfect 0 point resting place, turn the gimbal back on, go back into the app, and then do it all over again, right? Turn the motors off, make sure it's back where it needs to be, do your 0 point calibration twice, turn the motors back on, and finally it should be sitting perfectly where it needs to be. Basically, you have to keep doing this process until, you know, when you kick the motors on, it's literally staying in that 0 point resting place. Because if it jerks a little bit over, it thinks, it's telling itself this is the 0 point resting place. And you can look at it and go, that's not right. So you're gonna have to keep doing that process until it sits, but usually it gets it by the second go. It is a little crazy, and that is super tedious to me, especially coming from the world of something like this, where it's like, dude, I put it on here and I go and I get shit done. It's a lot of patience. So maybe that's good for me to have to test my patience, but it is kind of a pain in the ass. And then you have to do the same. You have to do that with the accelerometer calibration as well. You have to do that twice. But yeah, and then once you do all that and it's at a good resting place, you're good to go. You can rock it until the wheels fall off, you know? For me, it's a little bit of a weird thing because I do have a lot of weight. The dummy battery that I have isn't the right size, because you can run your camera off of the power of the Tilta Gravity G2, but my dummy battery is bigger than what is required to run the power off of the Tilta. But that's okay for me because we all know the Pocket 4K does eat tons of battery, and I've found a way to attach my power station to my Airy Rosette handle, and it's fine. You know, now my Tilta Gravity, it won't be burning through the batteries. Also, I don't have the actual Tilta recommended batteries. I have some that are from Amazon, so I don't know how amazing they are. So it's just better for me, overall security, to not be running the Pocket 4K off of the Tilta, because also I'm running the Nucleus Nano directly off of the Tilta. because it has a micro USB from the Tilta Nano motor directly into the motor head of the Tilta. So that's really nice feature. And yeah, I just found a way to basically rig everything to my area rosette handles. Now, maybe it won't make sense for you to purchase the Tilta Gravity G2, but for me it did, because I already owned all those accessories. I already owned the area rosette handles. They come straight from my shoulder rig. If you don't have those area rosette handles, you could be looking to spend anywhere from $200 to $500 extra just on handles and accessories for this thing. So it may not make sense for you to go the route of the Tilta, but for me that was one of the main selling points. I saw that it had 2 rosette female kind of heads on each side of the handle, and I thought, well, that's perfect. I already have area rosette handles, so it just kind of was a no-brainer for me to go the Tilta Gravity G2 route. It may not be that way for you. However, it was one of the first gimbals that announced that it could hold the weight and balance the Pocket 4K, so that's a thing too. But I also see a lot of people successfully flying with the Ronin S. Now, one of the awesome, coolest features to me of this Tilta Gravity G2 is the flashlight mode. Now that is something you will never be able to do on the GlideCam, not me and my expertise anyways. And the main reason is why is because your base is stationary. No matter what you do, you know, you can do these little weird jib modes, you know, but your head's gonna stay there. There's no way that, you know, your head's not gonna go like this while the GlideCam's going down. You're just never gonna get that. With this gimbal, with the Tilta Gravity G2, you can get these really awesome like faux jib moves, these miniature jib movements, because you're going down, you're pulling it down. Meanwhile, your camera is going like this. You know, your camera is going the opposite direction of where your actual gimbal is going. You know, your lens is going up and your gimbal can be going down, and that's pretty awesome. Now that's a really cool thing for me, a discovery for me. Obviously, you guys are like, what the hell, Justin? These things have been out for years. Where the hell have you been? I know, I've just been, you know, late to the game. I love this GlideCam. I'll never get rid of this. As you can tell, there's no going into an app and resetting and yada, yada, yada. I mean, it's pretty simple. It just set it and forget it, right? There are some pretty cool things that I've already discovered that I can do with that I cannot do with the GlideCam. And the biggest thing for me is finally, now I can pull focus with my Nucleus Nano while, you know, for me it's a big one with my reality shoot that I have. I'm walking around, I'm following, I'm a one-man band. I don't have the budget to hire an AC to pull focus for me while I'm running around on the GlideCam. Now I can have the Tilta Gravity G2 and I got my Nucleus Nano and I can just rack focus as much as I want, and I absolutely love that. Now I do want to talk to you guys about this base plate. I've seen a lot of guys online putting this base plate in the wrong direction, and I've actually talked to some people and read a lot of forums about when they set their camera down like that, it tips over. See that? See how my camera's sitting right there? Look at that. Now, a lot of people cannot put their Tilta down like that. They're like, you can't walk away. Well, the problem is they're putting the base plate on wrong. There's a simple trick to this, and I learned this just by, you know, watching the Tilta guys, okay? They're the only ones I've seen put the base plate on properly, and it's probably because they friggin' built this thing. So your base plate, it has this little turning knob. Now, we would think, yeah, it only makes sense to us because of what we're used to, right? That this little turning knob would go to the back. You would think it would go to the back. It kind of would make sense that way. If you're on a table, it would hang off of the table. You can twist it correctly, but that's wrong. It's actually, this is holding the weight. This little thing here with your turning knob is holding the weight of the lens and everything, because your lens is pointing forward. So when you put this on the back side, then your camera's gonna tip over. That's why people are, you know, having problems with these things and tipping over. And it's just a simple solution, guys. This little screw thing goes in the front. And that's pretty simple. I know it sounds weird. It's like, who the hell's not doing that right? But look. And I got that huge camera on there and it's just sitting there perfectly. So yeah, that's just a little thing a lot of people don't know about. There is a way that you can fly it on the Tilta Gravity, and it handles it pretty well. And like I said, people are flying FS5s, they're flying C300s, they're flying Reds, they're flying big cameras on that Tilta, so there's no reason you can't balance the Pocket 4K with your cage and your Metabones and all of that. Another thing I want to point out is that Tilta did recommend some certain options, you know, because Tilta are right here in Burbank. I do live in the LA area. They did recommend that when you go into the app and you go into your motor settings, they did recommend that a good speed is 40. So I just went in here, well, my whole thing's off right now, but I went in here and put my pan, tilt, and roll. I put all those to 40. Tilta kind of recommends those numbers, and they also recommended for the stiffness, you know, somewhere between 20 and 25 for all of it, the pan, tilt, and roll. So I kind of set all my numbers to that. I don't know, maybe you guys have better numbers that you found when you're rocking your Pocket 4K on the Tilta Gravity. I'm just kind of new to this whole Tilta world, so I'm just kind of going by what Tilta, the shop in Burbank, recommended to me. I don't know, guys. I hope you found this video beneficial. Big shout out and gigantic thank you to all of my loyal subscribers. You guys rock. Again, guys, if you're interested in anything that I talk about in this video, look down the description below. The top line there says check out my kit bag. It's an online virtual kit bag, and all of the stuff I use on my professional shoots, my YouTube shoots, pretty much almost every piece of gear I own can be found in that online kit bag. So go in there and check it out. As always, thank you for watching, and till next time, that's a wrap.